Rabbi Klein from the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. As we enter Rosh Hashanah 5782, there is indeed a lot to process. So many changes, not only the health crisis that we've encountered, but sociological changes, political changes, and of course, each of us in our own personal life over the past year. And I think it's very hard to process everything that happens. Sometimes the lessons of life are only revealed in hindsight. In this week's Parsha, at the end of 40 years, Moshe bestows upon the people blessings and curses. If they keep the mitzvot, they will have blessings in the land. If not, the blessings will unfortunately turn to curses. For the Torah, the land of Israel is not a natural right, like some Jews believe. In the Torah, it is a conditional right predicated upon being in alignment with the divine will. This is indeed a very high bar, almost a utopian goal that we always strive towards. Immediately following these blessings and curses, Moses adds what seems to be a retrospective of the past 40 years. Moses recalls that they were taken out of Egypt with miracles and wonders. They defeated the great nations in the wars. They were led through the desert, and all kinds of miracles that happened at the time. Following this very brief catalog of events, Moses says something that I think is very enigmatic. Yet, until this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to know, eyes to see, or ears to hear. Thus, they should learn from their past and observe the mitzvot, to do righteous and good. What does it mean? Yet until this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to know. Don't the Jewish people know that they were led through the desert? What are the people to understand now that they did not understand before? Clearly, Moses is underscoring the fact that they only understand the import of the events now. How can we know this? I think the key to this puzzle can be found in the words lev lada'at, a knowing heart. Rashi recognizes the ambiguity of these words because they obviously know the history of the past 40 years. So Rashi writes that God, after all of these years, granted them a knowing heart, quote, to recognize a good that God has given them in order that they cling to him. Rashi focuses on two religious dispositions that are implied by a knowing heart: gratitude and dvekut, which means clinging to God. Let us examine each individually. What's the connection between a knowing heart and recognizing the good done unto you? In fact, if one does a brief survey of Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, you'll see that indeed the heart is the center of human understanding, or to use a modern term, our consciousness. It is the heart or our consciousness which determines the nature of our actions and the decisions that we make. Moshe uses many strategies to appeal to the people to observe the commandments, the mitzvot. Sometimes Moses threatens God's punishment. In other times, he entices them with reward. But I think his most powerful argument is an appeal to the heart. Moses asks them to dig deep down in their heart, for the heart is the place of truth. And the truth is that God has given them everything. They should observe the mitzvot as an expression of enormous gratitude. In fact, the Hebrew word for Jew, Yehudi, comes from the Hebrew root to thank, todah, to acknowledge. For Moshe to deny this fundamental religious truth is to, quote, deceive the heart, something the Jewish people did in the desert time and time again. Let's take, for example, a few weeks ago in Parashat Ekev. In that Parsha, Moses describes a hypothetical situation in the future when we plant, we harvest, we eat, but we forget to bless God for the goodness that we received. Why? Moses describes that our hearts may become haughty, and we tell our hearts the lie that we produce the food. If not for our own effort and ingenuity, the earth would yield nothing. This haughty heart, this false consciousness, is bluntly attacked by Moses. He reminds the people that they had nothing in the desert, and God fed them for 40 years in order to teach them that even now it is God that gives them the power to plant in the first place. It is ultimately God who brings them blessing. Moses is telling them and us that to expect that hard work will pay off is an illusion. It is an arrogance of the heart. We always need what we say in Judaism as the Siyata Dishmaya, the support of heaven as well. We do our part, and the divine, God willing, responds. Later in the same Parsha, Moshe dispels another false narrative of the heart. After inheriting the land of Israel, people may assume that we were granted the land because we deserved it, because of our righteousness. In fact, in the 9th chapter of Devarim, Moses reminds them of their inglorious history culminating with the golden calf. He encourages them to circumcise their hearts and to realize that God is the master of heaven and earth, and yet God decided for whatever reason to choose you. God has given you a great honor. Again, Moses is encouraging the people to recognize how fortunate they are and that nothing that they did is truly deserved, but God is giving everything to them. The Talmud, commenting on our verse, reads the words only now, that God only gave you a heart, knowing heart only now, emphatically. Only after 40 years did they truly recognize the gifts that they had received. They knew the stories, but only now do they take them to heart, which for them was an entire lifetime. The Torah Tamima, a 19th century commentary by Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein, criticizes the Jewish people, stating for those 40 years the people saw the miracles, but they were guilty of the sin of kafui tova, of being ingrates. In our own lives, how many times do we deceive our own hearts? How many times do we say to ourselves that we deserve something because we worked for it? How often do we suffer when we do not get what we think is coming to us? In reality, every breath we take has not been earned, but granted by God. And this is the lesson that Moshe is teaching now to the Jewish people, to appreciate the gifts. This year, more than ever, we have recognized how vulnerable we really are and how important it is to receive and appreciate the gifts that are given. Now, when one truly internalizes the value of gratitude, then we can embrace the second religious disposition implied by Rashi. As you remember, devekut, a clinging or love of God. Aviva Zornberg, a teacher of Tanakh in Jerusalem, once mentioned something fascinating. Only in the book of Deuteronomy, of Devarim, is the love of God a primary theme. Love grows out of gratitude, and only after 40 years, when the book of Devarim was composed, do the people really begin to understand what they were given. Moses could only appeal to the love of God now. Love is practically manifested in the fact that we want to give back to the object of our love. In theological terms, the mitzvot are an expression of love. This lesson is implied in the first paragraph of the Shema. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol lavavcha. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these things which I have commanded to you today shall be placed upon your hearts. There are many reasons to observe the mitzvot. As I said, expectation of reward or fear of punishment, sense of obligation. But the highest level in Jewish theology is love. The rabbis chose this paragraph to recite every morning and evening, the Shema, because it contains the theme of Kabbalat ol Malchut Shemaim, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Clearly for the rabbis, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven requires a knowing heart, a heart which recognizes blessings and is ready to love God. May we all be blessed with a knowing heart. Shabbat Shalom.